The World War II spy movie Decision Before Dawn starts with the following quote. Of all the questions left unanswered by the last war, and probably any war, one comes back constantly to my mind. Why does a spy risk his life? For what possible reason? If the spy wins, he's ignored. If he loses, he's shot. Ooh, we think this is an excellent question to ask of any spy movie. Hi, this is Dan.
And Tom.
Of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Today, we decode the 1951 movie Decision Before Dawn, which is based on a true spy story from World War II.
Okay, now, Dan, every time we do these, especially about movies that people probably aren't aware of, I ask the question, is this a spy movie? So what do you think?
Yeah, well, there's spying going on. And they want us to think this is not only a World War II movie, but a spy movie. But the war dominates as the background for all of this, for sure. But there's spying going on.
The whole mission is a spying mission. So to me, this really is a spy movie. I mean,
Yeah.
it's about there's a guy spying against his country of Germany for the Allies.
Yeah.
And it is set in World War II, but we really don't see much fighting. So yes, it is a war movie, but given it's about a spy's mission, I think it is a spy movie.
Yeah, okay.
Now, before we get more into the plot, I think we should give some background to this movie and explain why we chose this one to do an episode on, because we know many of you haven't heard of it before. Decision Before Dawn is based on George Howe's novel Call It Treason, which was released in 1951, and it was the first spy movie ever nominated for a Best Picture Academy Award. It was also nominated for Best Film Editing. And that was kind of interesting because between 1951 and 1994, no other Best Motion Picture nominee was only nominated in one other category. So it's kind of an interesting how the awards ceremonies and stuff looked at this thing. It was released in black and white, not color, and I think that added to the grittiness of this war-based movie.
For sure.
So it is the first spy movie nominated for Best Motion Picture, and we guess you've never heard of it. And we hope our discussion will give you an idea if you want to watch it.
Yeah, I was surprised that this movie earned an Academy Award for Best Motion Picture nomination, too. I thought it got a bit preachy at times, and it wasn't of the same quality as we normally see from those nominees. I mean, the other nominees that year were An American in Paris, oh man, that won, A Place in the Sun, Quo Vadis, and A Streetcar Named Desire. Yikes. I bet that most of us have heard of the other nominees and hadn't heard of Decision Before Dawn before. Well, maybe before this episode. Anyway.
Now, I read there was a big marketing campaign by the producer, including a 12-page glossy insert in the major trade rags. Now, this is commonplace today, but it really apparently wasn't as popular back then. And I'll also agree with you that Decision Before Dawn gets a little bit preachy. And I think part of that was it was one of the first American or British-based movies since the war trying to give a positive or at least a sympathetic look at the non-Nazi German people. And I think they were trying to make the point that regular citizens were decent people. It was just the Nazis that weren't. And that can come off a little bit preachy.
Yeah, it can. I'm not going to go overboard on the preachy stuff because I think that is true. That's what they were trying to do. All right. I always like to know why a movie is called what it's called. And in this case, Decision Before Dawn, like you said, it was based on the novel Call It Treason. However, according to Turner Classic Movies, the director, Anatol Litvak, changed the title to Decision Before Dawn due to the potential negative perception in Germany, where the original title might have been misconstrued as a slur against the German population in general. So this is the stuff we're talking about. The new title, Decision Before Dawn, was chosen to avoid this misperception and gain a wider acceptance. So, yeah, that's the reason why it's a little preachy, I think. It was trying to accomplish that. But again, I think it's the trying to separate the Nazis from the Germans. All right, let's talk about the plot of Decision Before Dawn. This movie starts with that quote that we mentioned up front. And with those words being said, we see a spy get shot by a firing squad. That's a good start for the movie.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
It sets a nice happy tone.
Yeah, we can be pretty much sure that spies are going to be at least a part of this one, right? As I've said, this is a war movie with a spy mission interjected into it, but the spy mission is the dominant theme. It's an ominous start, and one that does talk about spies, for sure. The movie cuts to a narrator talking about the war and its desolation. The narrator is Lieutenant Dick Rennick, who is played terrifically by Richard Basehart. He's one of the key characters in the movie. Then we get a scene where Lieutenant Rennick captures some German soldiers.
This scene was really disappointing to me because it looked like it was done in a cheap TV studio. And for me, that was disappointing.
That shot was a smack in the face, I think. The rest of it, pretty
Yeah,
good. Right.
the rest of it I thought was good because much of this movie was filmed in real world locations. But when you first watch it, you don't know those are their locations. So you see this scene, it looks cheap, it looks, like I say, a cheap TV studio. So my initial thought when I saw this was, oh no.
Yeah.
And this movie was filmed 6 years after the end of World War II. So they were able to film it at many of the sites where the buildings were still tattered and rubbled, post-war states. So this opening scene is disappointing, but the scenery gets much better as the movie progresses.
Yeah, there you go. So when we're talking about our decoding sessions enhancing your viewing experience of a movie, this is an example, right? The location shots get much better, and they're actually pretty awesome because they're real.
And if it had all stayed like this first scene here, I doubt we'd be doing this session.
Yeah. So one of those Germans who's captured is someone from the Luftwaffe named Corporal Karl Mauer. Mauer gets the code name of Happy. The movie is based on his story. He is played by the wonderful, terrific actor Oskar Werner. Spy movie fans will recognize him from the 1965 movie The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, where Werner played Fiedler.
Yeah, now for me, I first remember seeing Oskar Werner playing Harold Van Wyck in the TV show Columbo. He was the guy with the digital watch and the video cameras all over his house in the episode titled Playback. And it's great to see him here in an earlier performance in his career.
All right, Tom, you do love Columbo.
I do love Columbo.
Yikes. Anyway, Rennick is kind to the German soldiers that he just captured. He drops them off with some Allied soldiers and proceeds to headquarters in the Abbey or convent or something like that. And we meet Monique, played by Dominique Blanchard. She has an administrative role, and we will see her a few times during the movie. Rennick gets brought to Colonel Devlin, as Rennick will be Devlin's communications officer, and Devlin is played by Gary Merrill.
Now, I like this set that they use here because it's supposed to be a convent and a sanctuary. Yeah. So the military uses it as an operational base. They've got kids there, so there must be some kind of schooling, or the kids are living there. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one of those places that don't bomb this place because it's a humanitarian place. And so the military uses it.
Yeah. We've seen lots of that going on in the last couple of decades. All right, next, there is a scene that we've seen something very similar to in many movies. A team needs to be put together, and there are a bunch of quick interviews to assemble this team. We saw it in the documentary The Mole Agent, The Guns of Navarone, The Dirty Dozen, and even in The Sting. So it's a common way to show that there was some thought in why this team was put together with these characters. And hey, this is 1951, 10 years before The Guns of Navarone, 16 years before The Dirty Dozen. So that's pretty cool.
Hey, but if you're going to build a team, you got to build a team.
You got to build a team, right? Hey, you have to do what they have to do. They got a big mission here. And this is where the main plot gets laid out. Devlin wants to use some of the German prisoners of war for a mission to find out where the Nazi Panzer Division is. He has to get permission, as using POWs like this appears to be something new. This movie is set toward the end of the war. So some of these Germans turned spies were turned because they thought it would accelerate the inevitable end to the war.
Yeah, now in real life World War II, the OSS did turn German spies against Germany. Now, about 30 of these spies went on what they called tourist missions. These missions have the spy reporting Wehrmacht movements. I mean, a mission of this type is key to the plot of Decision Before Dawn, and this is why they were recruiting these spies. So it was a real life type of a mission that they were going to portray in this movie. In fact, at the beginning of the movie, they say it's based on a true story. And just as a reminder, the OSS, you hear that term, it was the predecessor to the current CIA in the U.S.
Yeah, OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. All right, well, this is something we talked about in our interview with historian Rick Bayer when we talked about Operation Bodyguard. Rick talked about how agents would be captured by the Allies and told that if they didn't turn spy for the Allies, that they would be killed. Something similar happens here, but these were POWs, not spies we were turning into double agents. So it's a little different.
And it does give the movie a feel of reality, which is kind of nice. This movie does feel really like it's based on real stuff, like they say it is. And it does feel like, hey, this could have happened.
Yeah, well, it's based on a true story. So, yeah, a lot of times based on a true story doesn't mean much other than, a minimum amount that might be true. But this one, with the location scenes and everything else, pretty cool. And the fact that they really did do this in World War II. Okay, there you go. I think it may also be because George Howe, who wrote the novel, was part of the unit sending the German POWs out on missions. And Peter Viertel, who wrote the screenplay, had been an OSS officer during the war and had been involved in training captured or refugee Germans to work as American agents behind enemy lines, like the Gary Merrill character in this movie. So it seems to work well from a realism standpoint.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the basic plot. The OSS turns some Germans into Allied spies to find that Panzer division. We don't want to go into more of the specifics as we don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't watched it and are compelled to after listening to this episode.
You should watch it.
But we want to talk about what works and what doesn't work in this movie. And we'll give you our overall thoughts at the end.
All right, let's start with the positives of Decision Before Dawn. The cast and director. The movie was directed by Anatol Litvak. Litvak was nominated for the Best Director Academy Award for the 1949 movie The Snake Pit. He also directed the classic Sorry, Wrong Number. Frank McCarthy joined Litvak as a co-producer. McCarthy also produced the Best Motion Picture winner, Patton. So it's pretty cool. The cast is also solid in this one, although it isn't star-studded, really. Right? The key Americans are solidly played by Richard Basehart. He was excellent. And Gary Merrill. He was very good as well. They're really fine actors, but not exactly stars in the same realm of Richard Burton or Ralph Richardson. They also have a few USA military men playing themselves, which is kind of a nice touch.
I like that. Now,
Yeah.
much of the rest of the cast was played by Austrian, German, or French-born actors. And we mentioned Oskar Werner earlier, and I think his performance makes this movie work. He's very good. He's in most of the movie.
Yeah.
And if he wasn't good in it, it wouldn't have been a good movie.
Yeah, everything he does in this movie is terrific. Even him running, his facial expressions when he's looking over his shoulder. I mean, he's got, there's so many scenes he's in, and he's terrific in every one of them. And Werner and Richard Basehart did most of their own stunts, actually, in the movie, including a swimming scene in the Rhine River.
The way they shot that from the back, I just figured those were stunt people.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty cool.
I like it when actors do their own stunts.
Yeah.
Now, other actors like Hildegard Neff, who played Hilde, Dominique Blanchard, who you mentioned, who played Monique, and Helene Thiemig, who played Fräulein Schneider, all turned in solid performances here.
Yeah.
And in fact, I actually think the foreign actors turned in more solid performances than the American actors.
Yeah, I thought the acting in general was pretty solid. There's another important character, Sergeant Rudolph Barth, who is also known as Tiger. Now, I liked him. He's played by Hans Christian Blake. He is one of the Germans turned spy for this mission, and he is willing to mix it up a bit and get involved with the riskier parts of the mission. He was a prolific actor in Germany and also was in such Hollywood movies like the 1965 movie, The Battle of the Bulge. That's a huge one. And the 1962 movie, The Longest Day. So, guys knows war movies for sure.
Yeah, no, I think Tiger was probably my second favorite character behind Maurer or Happy.
He was solid. He was solid.
And part of it was because of the juxtaposition between the two characters. But the combination of Blake and Werner in these roles worked really well. And
Yeah.
Dan, you said that Tiger was willing to get involved in more risky things than Happy. I liked how they did that.
What is it about spy movies that brings us characters called Tiger? We have Tiger here. You only live twice, gave us Tiger Tanaka. Titan has a character called Avanish Singh Rather with a code name of Tiger, who has appeared in other movies of the Indian-based YRF spy universe. And of course, you have the French movie codename Tiger from 1964. So, hey,
Yeah,
Tiger
that
wins.
is kind of weird. I don't know why, but it is definitely a common name for code names in spy movies.
Yeah, there you go. In our episode called How to Build a Spy Movie, we talked about how most spy movies need moral ambiguity, and Happy, or Corporal Maurer, has moral ambiguity and a bit of a moral dilemma in his choice to spy for the Allies. That whole context is fantastic throughout the movie. That conflict in your mind of what you're doing. Wow.
Yeah, true. Now, you know what? I forgot. I wanted to talk about the actress who played Hilda for a minute. She was a strong character thrust into a very tough situation. And actress Neff was in a POW camp in real life. So
Okay.
I think she turned in a very good performance here, partly probably because she was drawing on some of her real life
Yeah.
experiences. And I also like her viewpoint on life. She had appeared naked in the 1951 movie called The Sinner. Not
Wow.
shockingly, the Roman Catholic Church didn't like this, right? So her response to the criticism was, I can't understand all that tumult. 5 years after Auschwitz? For her to follow that performance with Hilda was a great choice, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hilda was not exactly a saint in Decision Before Dawn either, but
Yeah. Yeah.
a much
She was
stronger
excellent, though.
role. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's look at the location. We kind of mentioned the locations and the authenticity of these locations.
You know, I mentioned at the beginning that the arrest scene wasn't very good set or location, but
Yeah,
the
yeah,
rest
yeah.
of the movie, they did a great job of showing us reality. And
Yeah.
partly because they did it so soon after the war. They used real bombed out buildings and towns
Mm.
from World War II that hadn't been repaired yet. So
Yeah.
they were able to give us this great feeling of actually being there by the way they did the location scouting on this thing.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the amount of bombing that went on in World War II. This is only, what, 6 years, 5 years after the war is over.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that wasn't repaired all over wherever bombing took place.
And I
England,
love the way that,
everywhere.
they had, fire coming off these buildings and stuff like that. But they
Yeah.
were using real stuff. It wasn't all just sets.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some of the fire I thought looked a little fake. Like it's in these two windows, but it's nowhere else or whatever. I don't know. But I like it. But the actual using the actual building out was fantastic.
We've said this is a true story, but one key plot point revolves around the town of Würzburg. This town was real and had been heavily bombed. But there's a key point in the movie where one of the characters has a moral dilemma about a chemical plant being bombed. Well, the town was real, its fate of being bombed was real, but in real life, the chemical plant didn't exist.
Yeah, okay. I did like the tension that the chemical plant added, though, to the character's dilemma. That was kind of interesting, even though it wasn't real in real life. It was a nice touch that gave us some good tension and uneasiness, which is good. We saw something similar in the movie The Imitation Game. What do you do when you know something that you can't tell anyone else about?
Well, especially if it is going to cause some pain.
Yeah. Churchill had the same dilemma in World War II with the bombings in England and stuff. Sometimes he had to keep things quiet, even though they cracked the German code sometimes.
Yeah, well,
All right.
that was the thing. Like in the imitation game,
Yeah, yeah.
like okay, I know that this
All
is
that
going
was
to be
true.
these are going to be the true movements. Now, the part that wasn't true was the one of the guys says, "Oh, what about my brother? He's on one of those
Right.
boats."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, but that's a moral dilemma, and there's a similar dilemma here.
Yeah. Yeah. Another area of authenticity was the use of a numbered blacklist. There was a book published called The Blacklist, which listed the names of the people that were blacklisted by the Nazis. These people would be detained and often killed. The movie uses the blacklist to add even more tension. It was a dramatic touch that also just added to the authenticity of the movie.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I think another strong point of authenticity had to do with the spy action.
Yeah.
None of these spies are going to be mistaken for James Bond. This thing
No.
feels real. It's their wits, their coolness under pressure, and using their arms and legs to protect themselves from capture or death.
Yeah.
And unlike a lot of other spy thrillers where the spies and their handlers just look like jerks, this film shows how stressed and emotionally difficult it can be to be a spy.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, the glamour we sometimes see in spy movies is non existent here. It's more along the lines of The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Yeah.
These later movies brought a non glamour view of espionage forward after Decision Before Dawn did it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that level of authenticity. If we remember the episode we did when we interviewed the real CIA operative, Andrew Bustamante, he talked about how you want to change as little as possible all the details about yourself. The truth is easier to remember than a lie. So Happy's forged documents use his real age and place of birth, only changing his name. So that was good.
Makes it
I
easier to
liked it.
remember. An interesting twist that happens with the actor Oskar Werner is here. At the beginning of the movie, Happy's captured, and it was on December 8th, 1944. And
Yeah.
that was the date that Werner left the Wehrmacht.
In real life.
Yeah, in real life. So Oskar Werner actually left on December 8th,
Wow.
1944, and they kind of used that date for Happy here, kind of as
Wow.
an homage.
That's kind of cool. All right. I like that. Hey, now we have to add a level of authenticity in that this is another spy movie with a train.
It's got to have a train in it. It's a spy
Yeah.
movie. That's how we know it's a spy movie.
We love trains in spy movies. And here it is used to create tension as well as show us some of the non-Nazi Germans, giving us a not all Germans are bad kind of perspective. Now, you have to remember, and it's hard sometimes to remember, that Germans and Nazis were not all the same. Nazi refers to the members of the Nazi party and their ideology, while German refers just to the people of the German nationality. So there was a difference between Nazis and Germans. All Germans weren't Nazis. That's the
That's
point.
very true.
And I think that's what they're trying to bring out in this movie, too.
Yep. And
Right?
there's a great scene in here that I like when we talk about authenticity and how they did this. I can totally see this happening in real life. Happy has to read some medicine bottle labels to a Nazi. And he needed to do this to validate it. He was a medic because he was
Yeah.
supposedly a medic in the movie. So this gave him a level of authenticity because he was able to handle reading the labels and explaining what they did.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great way to test him.
Yeah. Yeah. That was good.
Finally, concerning the authenticity, the cinematography and lighting in many scenes in the movie boosted the authenticity of what we were seeing and enhanced the suspense of many of the scenes. Although, Dan, I think you just said you thought some of the fire stuff didn't.
Some of the fire things, it was a little weird, but it still was good. And the lighting was tremendous. I thought the lighting in this movie, and shot in black and white, when they colorize black and white stuff, you lose a lot of that brilliance of the lighting that they do in black and white movies. The lighting in this throughout.
And this is not colorized. This is still black and white
Right.
when you see it.
Well, there is a colorized version, but I don't like that kind of stuff.
I only
But,
saw the black and white.
yeah, watch the black and white. And the lighting is just tremendous throughout the whole movie. I mean, that should have won an award. That was fantastic.
I agree.
Now let's look at the ending. I'm not going to tell you everything about the ending, of course, but we're going to look at the ending. Another positive about this movie, Decision Before Dawn, was the ending. It was realistic and packed a punch, yet it left some ambiguities. We think this felt very, very warlike. Not every mission ends with all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed and everything going the way you want.
I agree with you. I think that it was also emotional and a poignant commentary on the sacrifices and moral dilemmas faced by those involved in espionage.
Yeah.
And it wasn't exactly the ending I was expecting, and I thought it was very solid. And remember, I said it before, this was supposedly based on a true story and mission.
And
They
it made
say
it realistic. Made it realistic.
Yep.
Yeah.
The last big positive I want to talk about are some of the memorable scenes.
There's plenty of them.
Yeah. And so let's try to discuss this, Dan, without giving away the movie.
Yeah, we won't. We
And
won't give away
first,
the movie.
I thought there was a very well filmed parachute drop scene because this felt realistic to me, very much on point for the themes.
Mhm.
When one of the characters is in the plane, they tell him something from the pilot that you heard happened all the time. So again, adding to the realism to this, and I thought it was a great way they did that.
Yeah, yeah. And we had seen the training and the preparation too for parachute jumping and stuff. So we saw a little bit of that in the movie as well. So there's a wonderful scene also with Happy and Helda, which highlights tough situations that a spy can find himself in. And that scene is terrific.
Absolutely.
And you'll see it. When you see the movie, you'll see it.
Yep.
The scene with the young boy is another very poignant scene and shows the boy dealing with a moral dilemma. And he's a kid. He's a, I don't know, 8, 9-year-old kid maybe. And he has to face this decision.
Yeah.
Those scenes are terrific.
Those really are, because you can kind of see the kid
You feel it.
going like, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Those scenes with the kid are fabulous and well done. The kid was terrific. Now, I already mentioned the train scene, so the last one to talk about here is a scene where Happy, the medic, has to assist the commander of the 11th Panzer Division. This scene has one of the best examples of a moral dilemma that Happy has to deal with, and it's a serious scene.
I thought that scene was fantastic. And to
Yeah,
be honest, I don't know what I would have done if I was happy in that scene. I'm afraid I might have made a different choice in war had that dilemma come to me. So it was
yeah.
interesting to see how that thing played out. Now, of course, we have the final escape. This was cinematically very well done. Lots of quick cuts were used to convey chaos and danger. And I imagine this scene helped Dorothy Spencer win her Oscar nomination for Best Editing.
You look at the editing and the cinematography here. I thought the lighting, again, throughout the movie was very well done. And we said enhancing this realism and the emotional impact and the moral ambiguity that we saw throughout the movie really added to the tension and your own internal conflict of, wow, what would I have done or what will they do in this next scene? So I liked all that. Now, not everything was well received with this movie. Where did Decision Before Dawn fall short? Okay. Well, while we talked about the acting being solid, some critics felt that the American actors' performances were lacking. Tom, even you mentioned that, right? He thought
Yep.
maybe they were a
Yep.
little weaker. They were described as stiff and unconvincing, which detracted from the overall impact of the movie. Now, I'm not sure if that was the actors or the lines that they were given, really. The movie was about highlighting the German POWs, especially Happy. I'm not sure that the American actors were given enough of a role or dialogue, really, to shine in the movie. But I thought Richard Besa, I thought he was terrific, I thought.
Another negative in this, and Dan, I'm going to shock you with this. Some critics complained about the pacing of Decision
Oh,
Before Dawn.
I'm going to be one of those, I think.
Yeah. I mean, this is a criticism of almost every movie we talk about. Sometimes people say parts of it were paced well, parts weren't. Here's another one. Some people thought that the pacing was off.
Yeah.
Because in this one, it was the funny thing about it was you'd read reviews and oh, the pacing was too slow. And then all of a sudden it rushed at the ending. And then other people just thought it was inconsistent throughout. So I don't know. I didn't really have a problem with the pacing.
Yeah, the problem is it's about a 2 hour movie, and there's a lot going on in this movie. I don't even know how they got it done in 2 hours, really.
Because of Dorothy Spencer's editing.
I mean, really, there is so much going on every second of the movie. Not exciting stuff all the time. I'm not saying that. Like, oh my God, one action scene after another. No, not that. I'm just talking about there's so much content in the movie that yeah, there could be pacing issues, and there were parts where you thought, okay, this is a long setup for
Well, I think part of
what we're
that
going
is
to get.
because some of it was psychological. And
Yeah,
there's not a lot of action to some of the conversations because it's you're trying to deal with these dilemmas. And so how do you make that look like boom, 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 boom? You can't.
yeah, and we go back to the concept of the moral dilemmas that we just talked about. There's a lot of moral dilemmas in this movie that people, spies, whatever, have to face as they're going through these scenarios. Some critics thought these moral dilemmas were handled too quickly, and diving into them maybe would have highlighted them a little more. I don't know. War has a lot of moral conflicts, and in Decision Before Dawn, there's tons of them. We saw a lot, but some thought they were done too quickly. But I don't think they could have spent more time because this would have been a 3 hour movie. There's so many moral
Exactly.
dilemmas, really.
Yeah.
What else
Yeah.
can you do? At some point, you got to do the editing, right? Like you said, boom, you got to cut it.
Okay. And you see as the audience member, hey, there's a moral dilemma. What would I have done in that situation? And you
Yeah,
go on.
yes. So I don't have a
Right.
big problem with this one.
Yeah. Now, the last criticism of this movie has to deal with the feel good elements of it. Some people thought they were too forced and took away from the grittiness of the movie. I'm not sure I disagree with this one. Many war movies have a feel good or our side is doing things better slant
Yeah.
to them, right? And this is really no different. So I'm not sure why this was such a negative feeling by some of the people who watch it. And maybe it was because of at the time, that's the way they were thinking. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Like, there are some feel good elements, and again, they're weaving this into this very complicated, complex story that's already 2 hours long. I mean, the movie had to be shorter than the war, so I mean, they had to they had to cut some stuff here. and whatever. You can't do everything. All right, finally, let's look at how Decision Before Dawn compares to and influences other spy movies. So, first off, the realism was a bit different, especially now with all of the action-focused spy movies we see. But the use of real locations, the moral complexities that we've been talking about, and the non-glamorous lifestyle of spying in a war were used in some of the movies we talked about earlier, especially like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Both of those movies also focus on realism and dealing with moral dilemmas and the personal struggles that spies have to deal with. And it's not pretty. It's not glamorous. It's not eating caviar and drinking champagne.
Driving Aston Martins. Yeah.
It's gritty and dirty.
Yeah. Now, another area of influence is the movie's focus on character-driven narratives. This movie focuses on character development and moral dilemmas. And it's, again, slightly nuanced from what you just talked about, Dan. But think of the movies The Lies of Others or The Bridge of Spies.
Yeah.
Both of these movies delve into the psychological and emotional aspects of espionage. And Decision Before Dawn led the way for this approach.
Yeah, 1951.
Now, there's also a line that I think may have influenced a line in one of the later James Bond movies. Inspector M says to C, a license to kill also means a license not to kill.
Yes.
In Decision Before Dawn, Happy tells Colonel Von Ecker, sometimes it takes more courage not to kill.
Yeah.
And that sure seems like that fed M's line many years later.
Yeah, I like that line. And we didn't talk a lot about the dialogue. I thought the dialogue in general was pretty good. I think a higher level of dialogue than you see in most war movies. There was one in the very beginning where the guy says, hurry up, you're holding up the war, It's like, okay. There were a bunch of things like that in the movie that made sense in the moment. Finally, let's look at the unique perspectives that this movie brings. First, we already talked about how the non-Nazi Germans were portrayed. This was an unconventional viewpoint from what we have historically seen. Other movies like The Imitation Game and Munich have similarly unique viewpoints in looking at the spy world.
And I'd add to the fact that by being nominated for the Best Motion Picture, it showed that spy movies can be taken seriously.
Yeah, well, this is a serious one. Yeah. I think Tom liked this movie a little bit more than me. I liked it. I think it's definitely worth a watch, but I thought it was fine. But it still surprised me that it was nominated for the Academy Award.
Yeah, me too.
that surprised me. All right. It's a fine movie with some nice spy stuff as its plot, and maybe worth a look if you love classic spy movies and have about 2 hours to spare. I think it's worth it. It's fine. At the time of our recording, you could stream Decision Before Dawn on YouTube in the USA. All right, that's a wrap of our decoding of the 1951 Academy Award nominated spy movie, Decision Before Dawn. This has been Dan
and Tom
of SpyMovieNavigator.com on our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Please check out our website and please subscribe to our podcast. That helps us a lot. Will you do it? And thanks for spending time with us.